In the old factories of Detroit, there was a rumor that sent shivers down everyone's spine, a story whispered among workers during their late-night breaks. It was said that if you worked the graveyard shift alone, strange things would happen. They called it deadly overtime. The story starts with a young man named Leo. Leo had just started his first job at an old factory in Detroit. He was only 17, eager to earn money, and didn't mind the long night hours. But he had heard the tales, of course, stories about strange noises and shadows moving on their own. He laughed them off, thinking they were just stories to scare newcomers. One rainy night, Leo's supervisor, Mr. Jenkins, asked him to stay late to cover a shift. All the other workers had gone home, and the factory was completely silent, except for the hum of the machines. "Are you sure you're okay to work alone, Leo?" asked Mr. Jenkins, his eyes filled with a strange worry. Leo shrugged confidently. "Of course, sir. It's just a few hours." As Mr. Jenkins left, he paused at the door and gave Leo a final, serious look. "Be careful, Leo. You never know what you might hear or see on the graveyard shift." Leo laughed it off and waved goodbye. He was sure these were just spooky tales to make the night feel scarier than it was. But as soon as the clock struck midnight, Leo noticed something odd. The humming of the machines grew softer, almost as if they were fading away. The factory lights began flickering, casting eerie shadows across the floor. He shrugged it off as old equipment acting up. But then, he heard it, a faint whisper, like someone calling his name. "Leo." His heart skipped a beat. He turned, scanning the room. There was no one. He chuckled nervously, telling himself it was just his imagination. But then he heard it again, louder this time. "Leo." He spun around, and there, standing near one of the machines, was a faint figure, a worker in old, dusty clothes, covered in oil stains. His face was pale, his eyes empty, staring right at Leo. He looked like he was from a different time, like he had been working in that factory for ages. Leo felt a chill run down his spine. Who are you?" he stammered. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it just lifted one hand and pointed toward the clock on the wall. Leo turned to look at the clock. It was stuck at midnight. No matter how much time passed, it didn't move. The factory seemed trapped in time. Suddenly, more shadows appeared. Leo watched in horror as one by one, ghostly figures emerged from the dark corners of the factory, all dressed in old factory uniforms, all staring at him with blank, lifeless eyes. They started moving closer, surrounding him, their footsteps echoing in the silent factory. "Why are you here?" Leo asked, his voice shaking. One of the spirits finally spoke, a man with a deep, mournful voice. "We're the workers of the graveyard shift, those who never made it out." Leo's eyes widened. What happened to you?" The spirit pointed to a giant machine near the corner, one that had been out of order for years. "That machine, it took us. One by one, we worked until we couldn't anymore. The factory owners didn't care, and we became part of this place, forever." Leo felt a wave of sadness and fear. He wanted to run, but his feet were frozen to the spot. The spirits moved closer, their cold, ghostly hands reaching out as if they wanted something from him. "You have to help us," whispered a young woman with empty, sorrowful eyes. "We're trapped, working overtime forever. Unless you can break the curse." Leo nodded, too scared to refuse. How can I help?" The spirits led him to an old metal box, dusty and covered with cobwebs. Inside, they whispered, "You'll find the names of all who were lost here. Burn the list, and set us free." With trembling hands, Leo opened the box. Inside, he found a long, yellowed list of names. Each name represented a life lost, a worker who had perished in the factory, forgotten by time. As he held the list, he noticed the ghosts watching him closely, their faces hopeful yet fearful. He took a deep breath, grabbed a lighter from his pocket, and set the list on fire. As the paper burned, the factory around him began to change. The lights grew brighter, the machinery hummed back to life, and the clock on the wall started ticking again. The spirits let out sighs of relief, their faces finally peaceful. One by one, they faded away, smiling gratefully at Leo. But just as he thought it was over, the last spirit, the man who had first spoken to him, paused and looked back. "Thank you, Leo," he said. "But remember, if you ever forget your promise, we'll be back." With that, he vanished, leaving Leo alone in the now empty factory. He felt both relieved and shaken, realizing he had just freed dozens of souls who had been trapped for decades. The next morning, Mr. Jenkins came in and found Leo still sitting there, dazed and pale. He looked at Leo with concern. "You stayed the whole night?" Leo nodded slowly, glancing around the factory. "Yeah, but I don't think I'll ever work the graveyard shift again." As he left the factory that morning, he couldn't shake the feeling that the spirits were watching, making sure he'd never forget the deadly overtime he had just survived. If you enjoyed this chilling story, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of mystery and courage. Don't miss out our next terrifying adventure. Hit that subscribe button and join us for another journey into the unknown.